A former head of state addresses an unseen audience while fresh lacerations open across his face and his left arm parts cleanly at the elbow. He continues speaking, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the damage. He laughs. The recording that captures this event was recovered under circumstances documented later in this file. He says there is no hope. At timestamp 18 minutes and 2 seconds, the subject addresses the unseen audience with a statement concerning a first rising and a subsequent consumption. He describes the observation of circles that are not circles, and refers to billions of dead souls held within a form of containment. He speaks of unravelers having eaten the moral fabric of a country, and of hearts having been rendered into filth. He identifies himself as originating from a kingdom situated at a level above the human, and questions what such an origin yields. He answers his own inquiry with a reference to a smile that condemns an entire nation. At 18 minutes and 43 seconds, the subject states that there is no hope. At 18 minutes and 59 seconds, applause is audible from an unseen source. At 19 minutes and 15 seconds, the subject recoils in a manner consistent with the sudden onset of severe pain. Additional lacerations manifest across the exposed ocular region, and further punctures appear across the forehead and the temples. The remaining portion of the left arm is observed to have been cleanly divided. At 19 minutes and 59 seconds, the subject resumes speech, indicating that further consensus has demonstrated that a majority of the national population continues to harbor hatred. He then refers, in sequence, to being eaten whole by a void, and to the emptiness, the sadness, the blackness, and the darkness. Laughter follows. At 20 minutes and 30 seconds, the laughter persists until the signal degrades into static. Description continued. SCP-1981 presents as a home video recording of former United States President Ronald Reagan, delivering what is known publicly as the Evil Empire speech, addressed to the National Association of Evangelicals at the Sheraton Twin Towers Hotel in Orlando, Florida, on the 8th of March, 1983. For the initial minute and 10 seconds of the recording, the address proceeds in a manner consistent with existing historical documentation. Following this interval, the content of the speech begins to deviate significantly from established records. The deviation intensifies progressively, and by later portions of the recording, the address bears no discernible resemblance to any speech verifiably delivered by the subject during his lifetime. At approximately the 5-minute mark, visible trauma begins to manifest upon the person of the speaker. Multiple incisions, lacerations, and penetration wounds are observed appearing slowly across the body of the subject throughout the remainder of the recording. No corresponding instrument, hand, or source of injury is visible within the frame at any point. Despite sustaining bodily harm that would, under ordinary physiological conditions, incapacitate a subject and prohibit further vocalization, the recorded figure continues to deliver the altered address without interruption. This continuation persists until one of two terminal conditions is met. Either the vocal apparatus of the subject is compromised beyond the capacity for speech, or the recording itself degrades into visual and auditory static at the timestamp of 22 minutes and 34 seconds. No recording extends beyond this point. Subsequent testing has established that SCP-1981 does not repeat. Upon rewinding the cassette and initiating playback a second time, the figure of Reagan will deliver an entirely new address, frequently diverging in radical fashion from any speech previously documented. Recorded subject matter has included, without limitation, the practice of torture, the molestation of minors, and forms of ritual sacrifice. The nature and source of the address remains undetermined at this time. The injuries sustained by the figure of Reagan during the course of these recordings likewise vary between viewings. Documented instances of trauma include impalement, genital mutilation, and further injuries, the specifics of which have been redacted from this file at the discretion of the Containment Committee. In no observed instance does the pattern of injury correspond to any preceding recording, nor does the delivery of the address appear to be interrupted by the trauma inflicted. In approximately 1 in every 7 viewings of SCP-1981, an additional anomaly has been noted. On these occasions, a single member of the assembled press detail present within the recorded footage will have been replaced by a figure clothed in black robes and wearing a conical hood, obscuring the features entirely. This entity has been designated SCP-1981-1 for the purposes of ongoing documentation. The position occupied by SCP-1981-1 within the press detail appears to be selected at random and does not correspond to any identifiable individual removed from the original footage. The significance of the appearance of SCP-1981-1 and its relationship to the broader phenomenon is at present unknown. The content of the addresses delivered by the subject during each playback is, in the majority of instances, incoherent. The speeches lack any discernible thematic structure and are largely composed of nonsensical anecdotes and rambling parables, delivered in a cadence consistent with the original speaker's public manner. Despite this general absence of coherence, isolated passages have been observed in which specific reference is made to events which the original speaker could not reasonably have known of or predicted at the time the source footage was produced. Documented examples include allusions to the terrorist attacks of September the 11th, the outcome of the 2008 Russian elections, and one further event, the details of which have been redacted from this file. In consideration of this predictive quality, considerable time and personnel resources have been allocated to the verbatim transcription of the speech delivered during every recorded playback. Attempts to duplicate the anomaly through the transfer of its contents onto a comparable Betamax tape have consistently failed to produce further anomalous behavior. However, cameras positioned to record the television screen upon which the object is broadcast have proven capable of capturing individual playbacks in a stable and reviewable form. Accordingly, all observations conducted upon the object are required to be recorded using the camcorder provided within the containment chamber, and the resulting footage submitted for subsequent review to the project supervisor, whose identity remains redacted within general documentation. It should be noted that years of accumulated exposure to ambient magnetic interference have contributed to a marked degradation of the signal quality inherent to the object. This deterioration compounds an already considerable difficulty faced by review personnel, as the extraction of coherent or meaningful information from any given playback session has grown progressively less reliable over time. Auditory and visual artifacts frequently obscure portions of the recorded material, and the fidelity of the transmission cannot be expected to improve through any conservation measure currently available to the containment team. A further consideration bearing upon the review process concerns the nature of the imagery itself. The mutilations sustained by the depicted subject during the course of each recorded event have been characterized by qualified reviewing personnel as extremely disturbing in both their manner and their persistence. This characterization is not offered lightly, and it has been formally incorporated into standing containment documentation as a matter of operational welfare rather than descriptive interest. Accordingly, it is recommended that any personnel who, following a playback session, report symptoms of squeamishness, nausea, acute unease, or comparable somatic and psychological distress, promptly present themselves at the on-site psychiatry facility. There, they are to undergo a Level 3 evaluation conducted by qualified staff. Compliance with this recommendation is regarded as a standard component of responsible engagement with the object, and personnel are reminded that such evaluations carry no adverse implication regarding their continued suitability for assignment within the project. During the initial containment period, The individual who serves as the recurring subject of SCP-1981's recorded footage remained living. In light of this circumstance, a surveillance net was deployed with the objective of establishing any relation, causal or associative, between the subject and the anomalous object. Despite sustained monitoring across an extended interval, no known connection was developed. It is noted, however, that the subject was reported to have frequently complained of nightmares during the years preceding the deterioration of his mental state, which was subsequently attributed to progressive neurological illness. The Foundation makes no formal claim regarding the significance of this correlation, and records it here strictly for the completeness of the file. A representative segment of recorded content, timestamped at approximately 17 minutes and 24 seconds into a given instance of playback, is reproduced in summary as follows. The subject appears to be delivering a formal address, invoking a renewal of traditional values, described as the tendons of the nation's strength. He then references a survey, purportedly concluding that the surrounding population had grown markedly more willing to participate in cannibalism than in the preceding century. He continues by declaring that the nation in question will not suffer abominations lightly. The address is interrupted by the isolated utterance of a numeral, followed by further statements concerning an awakening at the core of national identity. 2 additional numerals, an assertion regarding the cessation of a named hostile organization, and a concluding remark of a colloquial character. At approximately 17 minutes and 53 seconds, applause is recorded. The transcript resumes with a further monologue attributed to the subject, in which travel across an ostensible national geography is described. References are made to industrial sites, agricultural expanses, and the abandoned premises of a commercial entity, the latter noted as being occupied by unauthorized persons. Additional imagery invokes structures associated with harm to infants, decaying matter framed as a moral condition, and an elevated vantage from which the subject claims to have observed a landscape of collective distress. The rhetorical question posed by the subject is answered, after an interval, with a single word denoting a place of damnation. The audience is recorded responding with laughter. A muffled voice is registered from beyond the field of the camera, after which the subject issues a familiar colloquial rejoinder, and the laughter subsides. The subject continues with a series of statements pertaining to temporality and truth, incorporating malformed idiomatic constructions and a taxonomy of knowledge that trails into an indecipherable term. The subject then remarks that certain of these unknowns are present within the assembled audience. At approximately 16 minutes and 2 seconds, injuries previously sustained by the subject are documented as having progressed to a degree incompatible with structural support of the cranium. Vocalization ceases to be intelligible. The body is recorded as remaining animate for a further interval, during which gestural activity continues, and the spinal column is observed to separate from the neck cavity before collapse is noted. The recording degrades into static at 22 minutes and 34 seconds. Documentation returns to matters of designation, classification, and containment protocol. The item under discussion is cataloged within Foundation records as SCP-1981. Its assigned object class is safe, reflecting the assessment that the anomaly remains stable and predictable under the conditions currently imposed upon it. Special containment procedures are as follows. The object is to be housed within a secure video storage unit located in the media archive of the assigned site, the designation of which has been redacted in standard documentation. When the item is not actively in use, it is to remain undisturbed within this storage unit. During authorized viewings, the object is not to be removed from its protective casing beyond what is strictly necessary for playback. Personnel are further instructed that the item must not be exposed to any strong magnetic sources in order to preserve the integrity of the recorded medium and to prevent inadvertent alteration of its contents. A Betamax home video system, together with an analog television compatible with that format, has been provided within Observation Theater 02 at the assigned site. This equipment is designated for the sole purpose of reviewing the anomaly under controlled conditions. Additional video equipment has likewise been installed within the theater in order to record each viewing in full, generating secondary documentation for subsequent analysis and comparison across sessions. All personnel are reminded that access to the object and its associated equipment remains restricted to authorized research staff in accordance with standard media archive protocol. Description of the object itself is brief. SCP-1981 is a standard Betamax tape. On its adhesive label, the phrase "Ronald Reagan cut up while talking" has been written by hand in felt-tip pen. The misspelling of the former president's name is preserved from the original inscription and has been noted in all official documentation. Laboratory analysis has confirmed that the tape is composed of ordinary material, consistent in every measurable respect with commercial home video media of its period. Serial numbers recovered from the cassette housing correspond with home cassette tapes produced in September of 1980. The recovery circumstances of SCP-1981 are as follows. The object was initially encountered by a filing clerk employed at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in 1991. Upon viewing the contents of the tape, the clerk alerted local police, expressing the intent to locate the tape's creator in order to press obscenity charges. A low-level police investigation was subsequently conducted. At this stage, the Foundation was alerted to the matter and moved to secure SCP-1981. Class A amnestics were administered to relevant parties before further notification could take place, including notification of an individual whose identity has been redacted from the present file. Follow-up investigation of the Presidential Library's records was carried out by Foundation personnel. This examination failed to yield any leads regarding the origin of SCP-1981, its method of deposit within the archive, or the identity of the individual responsible for its inscription and labeling.